Have you ever noticed how your mood seems to color your entire day? The same exact circumstances can feel completely different depending on your internal state. Or perhaps you've experienced that uncanny moment when a thought crosses your mind and then something related happens in your life, what some might call synchronicity. We all sense intuitively that our inner world and outer reality are connected somehow. But if you're like most people, you've been frustrated by simplistic, just think positive advice that doesn't account for life's complexities or provide a deeper understanding of how this connection actually works. By the end of our journey today, you'll have a powerful framework for understanding your own agency to shape your experience, not through magical thinking, but through conscious engagement with what I call your mental matrix. You'll discover how your thoughts influence reality in ways both more subtle and more profound than most manifestation teachers ever discuss. We're diving deeper than common self-help messaging to explore a radical idea with profound implications, the principle of mentalism, often summarized as the universe is mental. This isn't about simplistic formulas for success. It's an invitation to consider the possibility that consciousness itself might be fundamental to reality, requiring us to engage thoughtfully with our inner landscape, the intricate web of thoughts, beliefs, and focus that shapes our experience while connecting us to everything else. What makes this approach different is that it balances personal empowerment with wider responsibility, honoring both your power to shape experience and your role as a conscious participant in something much larger than yourself. Let's begin with understanding what the principle of mentalism actually proposes. In the influential text known as the Kybalion, Ki-Bal-E-On, published in 1908 by anonymous authors calling themselves the Three Initiates, the first and foundational Hermetic principle is stated simply: the all is mind, the universe is mental. But what does this mean? First, we need to understand what the all refers to. In this context, the all represents the ultimate reality, the substantial ground of being underlying everything we perceive. Some traditions might call it God, spirit, source, or universal consciousness. Here's our first key insight. This principle makes a radical claim that turns our conventional understanding upside down. Consciousness isn't a byproduct of matter. Rather, matter and everything else we experience is an expression or projection of a cosmic consciousness. If true, this would mean the entire universe exists within what we might call a universal mind. As the Kybalion puts it, in which mind we live and move and have our being. Our individual consciousness would be like waves on this vast mental ocean, distinct in form but not separate in essence. The Kybalion presents this principle as part of an allegedly ancient wisdom tradition called Hermeticism, Her-met-e-sis-em, attributed to the legendary sage Hermes Trismegistus. However, scholars note that while the Kybalion uses Hermetic language, its direct connection to ancient texts is debatable. It appears more significantly influenced by the New Thought movement popular in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. But wait, if you're wondering why this historical context matters to you personally, here's why. Understanding these origins isn't just academic. It helps us separate the profound insights from the simplistic interpretations, allowing you to work with these principles more effectively while avoiding common pitfalls. New Thought emphasized the power of thought to directly influence health, success, and well-being, popularized through phrases like "change your thinking, change your life." What's fascinating is how this principle has been interpreted in dramatically different ways. There's the deep metaphysical view that reality itself is fundamentally consciousness, a profound ontological claim about the nature of existence. Then there's the more common self-help interpretation, focusing on using your mind as a tool to manifest desired outcomes in your life. This tension between viewing mentalism as a statement about the fundamental nature of reality versus a practical technique for personal improvement is crucial to understand. Rather than choosing between them, what might it mean to integrate both perspectives? That's the journey we're undertaking today, and it's what will give you that framework for agency within interconnection I promised at the start. Now that we understand the principle, let's explore how it creates the bridge between universal mind and your personal experience. If we accept, even hypothetically, the idea that the all is mind, we're still left with a pressing question. How does this cosmic principle connect to our everyday experience? This is where another Hermetic principle becomes essential, the principle of correspondence. What if I told you that this principle of correspondence provides the exact mechanism through which your thoughts influence your reality, in ways both more subtle and more profound than most manifestation teachers ever discuss? As above, so below, as within, so without. This ancient axiom suggests a fundamental symmetry between different planes of existence. The patterns of the macrocosm, the universe at large, are mirrored in the microcosm, the individual. Think of it as a holographic relationship. Each part contains an echo of the whole. This principle provides the bridge between the cosmic mind of the all and your individual consciousness. This is where the concept of your personal mental matrix becomes relevant. I define your mental matrix as the intricate web of thoughts, beliefs, assumptions, expectations, and focus that shapes your perception and experience of reality. Take a moment to notice right now what makes up your current mental matrix. What thoughts, beliefs, and focus patterns are shaping how you're experiencing this moment? Are you open and curious, skeptical, distracted, or fully engaged? Consider how dramatically your perception changes based on your mental and emotional state. When anxious, you notice threats everywhere. When in love, the world seems more beautiful. Your mental matrix is like a lens through which you interpret everything, often operating below conscious awareness. What the principle of correspondence suggests is that your inner state, your within, is not isolated or irrelevant to the larger reality, the without. There's a resonance or interaction between them. Your inner world connects to the larger mental fabric of reality. This provides a philosophical rationale for why inner work matters beyond simple psychology. If the all is mind and correspondence links inner and outer, then shifts in your mental matrix aren't just changing your subjective perspective, they're participating in the larger mental field that constitutes reality itself. Remember that fundamental principle we discussed earlier, the all is mind? Here's where it becomes personally relevant. Your thoughts wouldn't just be ephemeral events occurring in isolation within your skull. They would be actual interactions with the mental substrate of reality. This doesn't mean you can simply wish for anything and make it instantly appear. The relationship is much more nuanced, as we'll explore. What it does suggest is that how you engage with your mental matrix, what you believe, focus on, and embody internally may have far greater significance than conventional understanding would suggest, affecting not just your perception, but your participation in reality's unfolding. Before we explore practical applications, I invite you to sit with this question. If your inner world is somehow in correspondence with the outer world, what might that mean for how you engage with your thoughts, beliefs, and focus? What responsibility might that entail? Now that we understand the connection between universal mind and personal experience, let's explore how to actually work with our mental matrix in practical, grounded ways. This is where we move from philosophical exploration to lived experience. I want to emphasize that what we're discussing isn't about controlling the universe through magical thinking. Rather, it's about aligning your inner state with greater harmony and clarity, what the Kybalion calls mental transmutation. As you transform internally, your experience and interaction with reality naturally shifts. Let's explore 3 practical approaches grounded in these principles, each connected to different aspects of Hermetic philosophy. Remember, these aren't just self-help techniques. They're ways of consciously engaging with the mental nature of reality we've been discussing. The first is mindful awareness, the practice of observing your thoughts without judgment. This connects to the Hermetic principle of vibration, which states that everything is in motion, including mental states. When you practice mindful awareness, you're developing the capacity to witness your mental matrix rather than being completely identified with it. This creates space for choice rather than automatic reaction. Let's try this together. For just a moment, become aware of your thoughts without trying to change them. Notice how they arise and pass, and how they might be creating certain emotions or sensations in your body. This simple practice begins to reveal the structure of your mental matrix. What you're observing could be considered your current mental vibration, the quality and pattern of your consciousness in this moment. According to Hermetic principles, becoming aware of this vibration is the first step in being able to deliberately shift it. Remember that principle of correspondence we explored earlier? Here's how it manifests when you practice mindful awareness. You're not just observing mental activity, you're developing awareness of how your internal state corresponds with your external experience. The second approach is cognitive reframing, which connects beautifully with the Hermetic principle of polarity. This principle suggests that opposites are identical in nature but different in degree, and that mental transmutation involves shifting from one pole to another. In practice, this means consciously shifting your perspective on challenges, not denying difficulties, but intentionally looking for the opportunity within them, the learning edge, the growth potential, the positive pole within what appears negative. Consider a current challenge in your life. What if you asked, what's the opportunity here that I'm not seeing? What strength might this be developing in me? How might this be serving some larger purpose? This isn't about toxic positivity or denying pain, but about mental flexibility, recognizing that every situation contains multiple truths. The third approach is intentional focus and visualization, which connects to both mentalism itself and the principle of cause and effect. If consciousness is fundamental and your mental matrix influences your reality, then where you place your attention matters profoundly. Let's try this together for just 30 seconds. Close your eyes if you can and imagine embodying a feeling state of calm confidence. Don't just think about it, really feel it in your body. Notice how this shift feels physically and emotionally. This isn't just about visualizing material outcomes you want. More fundamentally, it's about cultivating the internal state that resonates with what you wish to experience or create. If you want to experience more love in your life, for instance, the practice would involve cultivating the feeling of love within yourself first, becoming the embodiment of what you seek to attract. This aligns your inner landscape with the quality of experience you're calling in. But wait, if you're thinking this all sounds too mystical to be practical, here's something fascinating. These ancient-seeming principles align remarkably well with modern psychological understanding. Mindful awareness relates to contemporary mindfulness practices. Cognitive reframing is central to therapeutic approaches like cognitive behavioral therapy. The power of visualization is studied in sports psychology and performance research. The placebo effect, where belief creates measurable physical changes, demonstrates how our expectations literally shape our biological reality. Neuroplasticity research shows how thought patterns create neural pathways that influence perception and behavior. These scientific findings don't prove mentalism as a cosmic principle, but they do validate the remarkable power of your mental matrix to shape your lived experience, a power we're only beginning to fully understand. I encourage you to experiment with these practices, not as techniques for controlling external reality, but as ways to engage more consciously with your own inner world. recognizing its profound influence on how you experience and interact with life. If we're pursuing authentic understanding rather than comfortable half-truths, we must directly address the challenging questions and potential shadows of the mind creates reality proposition. These are the aspects often glossed over in simplistic presentations. The difference between wishful thinking and genuine wisdom lies exactly in what we're about to explore. Understanding these nuances will give you an advantage most seekers never discover, avoiding the traps that cause others to abandon these powerful principles. Let's start with perhaps the most pressing question. If mind creates reality, how do we account for suffering, trauma, injustice, and tragedy? If someone experiences violence, poverty, or illness, are we suggesting they somehow created these experiences through their thoughts? I want to be absolutely clear. That interpretation is not only factually inaccurate, but potentially harmful. It risks blaming victims for circumstances beyond their control and can become a form of spiritual bypassing, using spiritual ideas to avoid confronting difficult realities. A more nuanced understanding recognizes several important factors. First, our individual mental matrix exists within larger collective matrices, family systems, cultural beliefs, societal structures, historical patterns. These exert enormous influence beyond individual control. Second, while the principle all is mind might suggest consciousness as fundamental, this doesn't mean your personal ego-level thoughts control everything. Your conscious mind is just the surface of a much deeper consciousness that includes unconscious aspects, collective dimensions, and perhaps cosmic elements beyond our comprehension. Third, genuine application of Hermetic principles requires integrating all 7 principles, not just mentalism in isolation. The principles of rhythm, everything flows in cycles, cause and effect, complex causal chains extending beyond our awareness, and gender, the interplay of receptive and projective energies, all suggest limitations to direct conscious control. A responsible approach recognizes that while your mental matrix profoundly influences how you experience and respond to circumstances, external factors absolutely exist, including random events, others' free will, and systemic conditions. Your power lies in how you engage with these realities, not in pretending they don't exist. Consider a situation where you felt completely powerless. With what you've learned about the mental matrix, how might you approach that situation differently, not denying its reality, but engaging with it more consciously? The second major critique concerns scientific plausibility. The claim that all is mind represents a profound philosophical statement about reality's fundamental nature, one that lies beyond current scientific verification. While some proponents attempt to justify mentalism using quantum physics references like the observer effect, these connections are often speculative. Quantum effects occur at subatomic scales and don't straightforwardly translate to macro-level reality creation as sometimes claimed. It's important to distinguish philosophical principles from scientific theories. Mentalism is better understood as a philosophical proposition or paradigm for interpreting experience, rather than an empirically testable claim. This doesn't make it worthless. Philosophy addresses questions that extend beyond what science can currently measure. The third significant concern is the risk of solipsism or narcissism. If taken to an extreme, couldn't the idea that mind creates reality lead to an unhealthy self-absorption? Might it encourage people to dismiss others' experiences or avoid collective responsibility? This is a valid concern, particularly given how some modern interpretations emphasize individual manifestation of personal desires. However, the original principle actually points in the opposite direction. If all is mind, and we are expressions of a unified consciousness, this suggests profound interconnection, not separation. Ethical application of these principles would recognize that your mental matrix doesn't exist in isolation, but in relationship with all other expressions of consciousness. This fosters consideration of how your internal states and external actions affect the whole, not just yourself. These critiques don't invalidate the potential value of working with your mental matrix, but they do call for a more nuanced, grounded, and ethical approach than is often presented. True wisdom lies in holding both the empowering aspects of these principles and their limitations in a balanced awareness. Perhaps the most responsible stance is viewing these principles as invitations to conscious engagement rather than absolute laws guaranteeing specific outcomes. The question becomes not, how can I control reality with my mind, but how can I engage more consciously with my inner world, recognizing its influence while honoring the larger whole of which I'm a part? Having explored both the practical applications and the important limitations of working with your mental matrix, let's expand our perspective beyond individual concerns to the larger implications of the principle, all is mind. If consciousness is indeed fundamental, if the universe is mental in nature, this suggests a profound interconnectedness. Our individual minds would not be isolated entities but expressions or aspects of a unified field of consciousness. This perspective resonates with many spiritual traditions that point toward non-dual understanding, the recognition that underlying apparent separation lies an essential unity. The Vedantic concept of Brahman, Buddhist emptiness teachings, mystical Christian unity, and indigenous relational worldviews all gesture toward this understanding. When we begin to recognize that your mental matrix exists within and as part of a much larger mental field, it fundamentally shifts how we think about personal transformation. Your inner work isn't just for your benefit anymore. It becomes a contribution to the quality of the collective mental environment we all share. Remember what we explored about the correspondence between inner and outer reality. Here we see it operating at a collective level. When you transform your mental matrix, you're not just changing your personal experience, you're participating in the evolution of our shared consciousness. Consider how profoundly we affect one another through our mental and emotional states. You've likely experienced entering a room and immediately sensing the atmosphere, tension, joy, excitement, or calm. These aren't just metaphors, they're recognitions of how consciousness creates fields that influence others. What if your efforts to cultivate clarity, compassion, and coherence within yourself are actually helping to elevate the collective field? What if your internal state shifting from fear to love, from reactivity to presence, from fragmentation to wholeness, creates ripples that extend far beyond what you can perceive? Imagine if just 100 people watching this video made the conscious choice to shift their mental matrix from fear to love today. How might those ripples extend through our shared consciousness? What might be possible if more of us recognized our role as co-creators within this interconnected mental field? This expanded understanding doesn't diminish the importance of practical applications. Rather, it infuses them with deeper meaning and purpose. Mindful awareness becomes not just a technique for personal stress reduction, but a way of bringing more consciousness into the collective field. Cognitive reframing isn't just about improving your mood, but about transforming how we collectively perceive challenges. Intentional focus becomes not merely manifesting personal desires, but aligning with and amplifying what serves the evolution of the whole. If all is mind, then perhaps our individual mental matrices are like nodes in a vast network, each influencing and being influenced by the whole. Our personal growth, healing, and awakening are simultaneously individual and collective acts. This perspective offers a powerful antidote to the potential narcissism we discussed earlier. Instead of using these principles solely for personal gain, we recognize our responsibility as conscious participants in a shared reality. Our inner work becomes an act of service. I invite you to consider, how might your engagement with your own mental matrix shift if you recognized it as intimately connected with all other minds? How might you approach your thoughts, beliefs, and focus if you understood them as contributions to our shared mental environment? Perhaps this expanded perspective is what ultimately brings the metaphysical and practical interpretations of mentalism into harmony, recognizing that working with your mind is simultaneously personal transformation and participation in the evolution of our collective consciousness. As we bring our exploration to a close, let's integrate what we've discovered about the mental matrix and how the principle of mentalism might shape your reality. We began with the radical proposition that the all is mind, the universe is mental, suggesting consciousness as fundamental rather than incidental to reality. Through the principle of correspondence, as within, so without, we found a bridge between cosmic metaphysics and personal experience. We explored practical ways to engage your mental matrix through mindful awareness, cognitive reframing, and intentional focus, grounding these practices in both ancient wisdom and modern understanding. We confronted important limitations and ethical considerations, recognizing that true empowerment requires nuance and responsibility. Finally, we expanded beyond individual concerns to consider how our minds exist within and contribute to a larger field of consciousness, reframing personal transformation as participation in collective evolution. Throughout this journey, we've been building toward the primary insight I promised at the beginning, understanding your agency to shape experience through conscious mental focus, not in isolation, but as a responsible participant within an interconnected conscious universe. The real power doesn't lie in trying to magically control the external world through thought alone. It lies in recognizing yourself as an active participant in reality's unfolding, capable of bringing greater consciousness, clarity, and compassion to your unique expression of the universal mind. This understanding calls for both empowerment and humility, claiming your agency while recognizing its context and limitations. It invites responsible creation rather than magical thinking, deep engagement rather than passive wishing. Remember when we discussed the principle of correspondence? As we conclude, I invite you to consider what it means to truly live as if, as within, so without, were a fundamental truth. How would that transform your relationship with your thoughts, emotions, and beliefs? How might it change your sense of responsibility to the whole? I encourage you to reflect on one aspect from today's exploration that resonates most strongly with you. Perhaps it's a practice to experiment with, a perspective shift to consider, or a deeper recognition of your interconnectedness with all that is. How might you engage more consciously with your own mental matrix this week? What internal shifts might you cultivate, remembering that these aren't just personal adjustments, but contributions to our shared field of consciousness? Whatever your path forward, may you walk it with both the confidence that comes from recognizing your power to shape experience and the responsibility that comes from honoring your place within the greater whole. Thank you for exploring the mental matrix with me today. If you found value in this journey, please consider subscribing to Transformative Narrative Wisdom for more content that bridges spiritual depth with practical wisdom. Share your insights in the comments below about how you might apply these principles in your life, and until next time, may your inner world and outer reality come into ever greater harmony.